Pause.
Go ahead.
We have to clap for Quinn.
Oh,
and then
to
we
let
can
him know?
record.
Okay.
Or, I mean, yeah. We have to because what
So he
happens
knows
is
when
when
to
we
cut
clap,
it. Yeah.
he knows where we're all in sync.
Oh,
right?
For the audio. For the audio.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, just one clap.
I don't know. We'll figure it out. He'll just figure it out.
I think we need to do that again.
Show.
This is we messed up the simultaneous clap.
How the f*** are we going to make a $50 million movie?
Yeah, so this is not an auspicious start here.
Welcome to a brand new podcast. Ian McLean is a writer and the author of TJ's War. David Blair is an actor and the narrator of the audiobook TJ's War. David and Ian have been listening to their readers and listeners and have decided to turn TJ's War into a movie. And since the story covers the entirety of World War II, the movie will cost at least $50 million. Will David and Ian succeed in their quest? Follow them in this podcast series. We're going to make a $50 million movie.
We're going to make a $50 million movie. That's what we're going to do. My name is Ian McLean.
My name's David, and I'm 50.
David Blair.
So my name is Mark Reed.
Our guest is Quinn Hare.
And today, Sia Yasatornrat. Let me quickly get you up to date beyond what the title obviously suggests. Well, we are going to make a movie. More succinctly, turn Ian's book of creative nonfiction about his father, called TJ's War, into a movie. With a preliminary estimated budget of, well, $50 million. Why not? Here's where I come in terms of this podcast, which you might gather is put together for really three purposes. One, to document the process from start to finish of just what it takes to make a movie from scratch. Two, well, to learn how to do that, learn as we go. We will eventually speak with producers, directors, editors, scriptwriters for the purpose of acquiring knowledge, but doing so transparently, so you, the audience, can be along for the ride with us. And thirdly, well, frankly, to promote the film as we go, so that when, not if, but when this is out at the theaters or released on Netflix or whatever, you as the audience will be just as excited about the premiere as we are, because you were along the ride the whole time.
I've written a book. You can buy it. It's out on Amazon. It's called TJ's War. That's the latest format. This was the earlier format. And it's a war story. It's an anti-war story. I think that's going to become more and more prevalent with world events over the next couple of years. And it's a love story. And it concerns a man called Thomas John McLean. He was called TJ, and he just happened to be my father. This is Fortress Harbour. And Fortress has been a place of history for nearly 1,000 years. Vikings used to come in here, land, and attack the cathedral at the top of the hill, take all the gold out. But in the Second World War, this was a place of training. Landing craft would come here, soldiers would get on board and go round to Nairn to land on the beaches about 5 miles away. It's very calm now, but sometimes the tides here can be treacherous. A number of people just didn't make it. All of this was secret, top secret. And so nobody was allowed onto Black Isle or off it without special clearance, all the way through the Second World War. This is the Oakfield Hotel, which my parents bought in 1963, and my mother ran. My father, TJ, just needed to get out of the house every day and get down to one of the pubs in Fortrose, and then when they wouldn't serve him any more alcohol, he used to go across to Rosemarkie and then beyond that to Cromarty. And this was where Thomas John McLean got in the door, just here, went upstairs on the 30th November, and over that night died in number 3 bedroom. 1st November 1970. Unfortunately, there's nobody in the house right now, so I can't get in. But I collected his breakfast from the kitchen, which was here, and made my way upstairs to the bedroom there and found him lying half in, half out of the bed. I didn't know he was dead at that point, so I took the breakfast stuff off the tray, put the tray as a bridge between the bed and the chair, and with all my strength as a 10-year-old boy, lifted him onto it with a pillow underneath so that he was more comfortable. And that's how my mother found him several hours later. He had died in the middle of the night. So this is Fortro's old cemetery, closed down about 30 odd years ago. New cemeteries at the other side of the town. A lot of the people, especially on this side, were alive when I was a child. Alistair Campbell, he was the owner of the garage just next door to our hotel. Him and his son Kenny, I don't know where Kenny is, he's hopefully still alive. But they fixed every car on the Black Isle at one point. Because this is Fortro's. It's an ancient town. It goes back to the 12th century. The royal borough of Fortrose and Rosemarkie. There's a cathedral, which the stone from was stolen by Cromwell to build the castle in Inverness about 400 years ago. So not everyone will be buried here if it's 800 years. There's about 500 people in this graveyard. And one of them was my father, Thomas John McLean, TJ, who died in Fortrose on the 1st of November 1970 and was buried here. And I was taken here after the funeral when all the mourners had gone, and there were many, and the stone wasn't here at that point. It was just a mound of earth, and it had just been filled in by the gravedigger Tom McPhee. And this was the final resting place of Thomas John McLean, a man I didn't really know.
May the 25th, 1940, was not a date John McLean would particularly remember, despite being close to the summit of a Norwegian mountain. The days since early April had merged into a period of intense cold and desperate survival. Tempered steel at -20°C is not kind to human skin. Standard kit provided no protection to his soaking, freezing body, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt his feet. The others were equally miserable, perhaps more so. At least he had experienced highland winters from mountain slopes, and plenty of them. These poor buggers were lowlanders or townsfolk. Yet the men walked on, those that were still alive. John's captain was an officer fresh out of training, with all the confidence, arrogance and belief of the British Empire. The captain had been pushing his men forward since they first landed in Norway 2 months earlier. But this officer had left a trail of frozen bodies in his wake, none of whom belonged to the enemy. These had been men under his command. John guessed the captain would have been around 25 years old, only 6 years older than himself, but they were worlds apart. The small detachment was not big enough to hide the young man from Skye. As opposed to the men on either side of him who had been tending animals, ploughing fields, working in factories, driving buses, selling shoes, John had arrived from university, his studies cut short. The captain sensed John's intelligence, was challenged by it. The officer could see how his men naturally gravitated towards the quiet soldier who seemed to know more about rifles than his own sergeant. "You, McLean!" It was the captain marching down the line of trucks. John, who had been squatting over a paraffin fire, immediately stood to attention. "Sir." "What are you doing, McLean?" "Heating water, sir. Making tea." John looking straight ahead, his voice calm, measured, lacking the urgency of others when addressing the captain. I did not give anyone permission to light up. He was looking for a fight, leaning into John's face. A range of responses were running through John's mind. He was struggling to cope with the nonsense of his officer. Should he say something? Or just punch him on the nose?
John had left the mansion at the same time as Liz, so they walked together. Liz reminded John of Annie, just more serious, more committed, but with that same sparkle in her eyes, the same dimpled cheeks, even the color of her hair.
Well, after Jack's little speech, I'm not sure what we can talk about.
Liz had a smile that maybe said more than it should. It was when Liz spoke that the differences became clear. Gone were the soft tones of Annie's Scottish accent. Instead, this was cut glass, expensively educated, with BBC enunciation and diction. As she spoke, she smiled, and in that instant, the vestiges of Annie, the final clinging memories, dissolved to smoke and flew away.
Oh, I'm sure we'll think of something.
You're Scottish.
Steady now. I suggest you stick to the weather.
Can't do that. North of the border, you chaps only know rain.
They were walking down an aisle of poplar trees, their feet crunching on gravel.
Aye, lass. That's maybe true, but I know many types of rain.
TJ was looking into her smiling eyes. She liked being called lass.
Oh, that's interesting. Do tell.
He turned to walk backwards while never leaving her eyes.
Rain. Light rain, soft as dandelion wisps that kiss your skin.
Still smiling.
Salt rain, coming in from the Atlantic, tasting of time.
The smile was slipping now, changing. He was TJ, a man who could say whatever he wanted. Now here was Liz entering his world.
Black rain, falling in stair rods from cold, dark mountains of cloud, chilling your bones and making you very wet.
I think we'd better discuss this later.
Liz was breaking into the widest smile.
So, what do you know about?
Right now? Well, I know we are at the gate.
So, heavy water. Why was it so important to blow up a heavy water plant in Norway? What was that all about? Well, heavy water was produced as a byproduct in a hydroelectric plant in Norway at a place called Rusken. And it just turned out that that was exactly what the people who were trying to develop the atomic bomb for Germany and anywhere else, they needed this as a key component in producing the atomic bomb. It was required during the process to make the atomic bomb. Heavy water wasn't in the final product, but you couldn't make it without having heavy water. So the Germans knew this, and they were building up supplies of heavy water at Rusken with the intention of taking them down by train to Germany. And if they'd been able to do that, they probably would have had the atomic bomb before the Americans had exploded. The Americans and British and Canadians had exploded their atomic bomb in New Mexico. And at the same time, the Germans were producing an intercontinental ballistic missile. So the V1s and the V2s that were bombing Britain, bombing London especially, there was another one which was much bigger, and the blueprints were there, and von Braun and the rest of them were working really hard to build that intercontinental ballistic missile. And if they had that and the atomic bomb, then Europe and America could well have been taken out, and the Germans, the Nazis and Hitler would have won the Second World War. People talk about PTSD and people talk about the Second World War as if they didn't know what PTSD was then. Well, they did. They experienced it. They could see it, and it was no secret. They went through hell, and I think when you're in war, you're going through hell. I just think it's got to be avoided, and we must work much harder than we do to avoid this in the future. It's shame on us that it's still going on.
Well, I think if we can make this impact, those scenes are really sharp and tight. When we make an movie, I could see where it would have the message would resonate I would like to think with the Gen Zs. I think there is a tendency towards, like, can we not talk this out, right? Because I think there's that acknowledgement of mental health and trying to work things out way more than at least when you and I grew up, Ian. I mean, come on, man. Like, you know, I remember as a kid getting in trouble and I'd be crying or whatever. And my mom and dad be like, "You're crying? Let me give you something to cry about." You know, that was their level of discipline. Like, I can't imagine like a Gen Z kid taking it, you know? I mean, come on now. So why don't we wrap up this episode of we're making a $50 million movie and TV show.
Bye, everyone.
To find out more about the book, visit tjswar.com. And to buy it, click on the Amazon link below. To accompany us on our journey, please subscribe to this podcast because we're going to make a $50 million movie.